The billionaire caught his fiancée red-handed torturing the maid after the maid's toddler told him the truth. She thought no one was watching. She thought the cameras were off, the maid was powerless, and the truth would stay buried in marble floors and silk curtains. But a 3-year-old girl doesn't lie. A 3-year-old girl doesn't calculate consequences. She just points her tiny finger and says what she saw. And what she saw was about to destroy a billion-dollar engagement in front of the whole household. Welcome back, friends, to another emotional and inspiring true-to-life story. Today's story will touch your heart, teach you something about justice, and remind you that the truth always finds its way out, no matter how powerful someone thinks they are. Before we begin, tell us in the comments. Which country are you watching from? In a quiet, wealthy neighborhood outside Los Angeles, behind iron gates and marble columns, lived a man named Daniel Hayes, 34 years old, a self-made billionaire, kind-hearted but often blind to what happened in his own home. His fiancée, Victoria Lane, 29, was beautiful, charming in public, and something else entirely behind closed doors. Working quietly in their mansion was Maria Torres, 28, a single mother who cleaned floors to feed her daughter, little Sophia, just 3 years old. Maria never complained. She kept her head down. She believed if she worked hard enough, stayed silent enough, life would eventually be kind to her. But silence has a price. And on one ordinary afternoon, a toddler's innocent words would expose a secret Victoria had hidden for months. A secret that would change 4 lives forever. It started with a spilled glass of water. And it would end with a confession no one expected. Maria Torres arrived at the Hayes mansion every morning at 6, long before the sun fully rose over the hills of Los Angeles. She wore the same black and white uniform, carried the same worn tote bag, and pulled her daughter Sophia along in a small stroller because daycare didn't open until 8. Daniel Hayes had given her special permission. "Bring her," he'd said the first week she was hired. A child shouldn't be alone at 6 in the morning. Daniel was a man who had built his fortune from nothing. A tech company that started in his college dorm and grew into a name recognized across the country. He remembered what it felt like to struggle, and that memory made him generous in quiet ways his fiancée never understood. Victoria Lane, on the other hand, had grown up with everything handed to her. Private schools in Connecticut, a trust fund she barely touched, a face built for magazine covers. When she met Daniel at a charity gala 2 years earlier, she saw not just a handsome, successful man. She saw an empire. And Victoria intended to rule it. To the public, to Daniel's friends, to the cameras at every gala, Victoria was warm, graceful, generous. She volunteered at children's hospitals when reporters were present. She smiled for photos with orphan kittens. But the moment the doors closed and the staff arrived for work, a different woman emerged. "You missed a spot," Victoria said one morning, her voice flat and cold as she stood over Maria, who knelt scrubbing the marble entryway. "Do it again." Maria didn't argue. She never argued. "Yes, ma'am," she whispered, dipping the cloth back into the bucket. Little Sophia sat nearby in her stroller, clutching a worn stuffed rabbit, watching her mother with wide brown eyes. She didn't understand the tension in the room, but children feel things adults try to hide. She felt the coldness radiating from the woman in the silk robe. This had been going on for months. Small cruelties at first, extra chores added at the last minute, meals withheld during long shifts, harsh words muttered just out of Daniel's earshot. Victoria was careful. She never raised her voice when Daniel was home. She never left visible marks. She was, in her own twisted way, an expert at control. Maria needed this job desperately. Single motherhood in California wasn't cheap, and after her husband left 2 years ago, she had no one else to lean on. Her own mother back in Bakersfield was sick, needing money for medication. Maria swallowed her pride daily, told herself this was temporary, told herself Sophia deserved a better life and this paycheck was the bridge to get there. But the cruelty was escalating. What started as cold words had become something darker. One afternoon, while organizing the pantry, Maria overheard Victoria on the phone with a friend. "Daniel's so naive," Victoria laughed quietly. "He thinks I'm some saint. Once that ring is on my finger and the prenup is signed his way, I'll have access to everything. The maid, please. She's furniture. Nobody listens to furniture." Maria's hands trembled as she stacked cans on the shelf. She had heard things like this before from previous employers. The wealthy sometimes forgot that the people cleaning their homes had ears, had hearts, had dignity. But something about Victoria's tone, the casual cruelty of comparing a human being to furniture, lodged itself deep in Maria's chest. She thought about quitting. She thought about it every single night as she tucked Sophia into bed in their small one-bedroom apartment in East LA. But quitting meant no income, no health insurance for Sophia's asthma medication, no roof over their heads within 30 days. So she stayed. She endured. She told herself it was almost over. Daniel and Victoria's wedding was just 2 months away. And after that, maybe things would settle. Maybe Victoria would relax once she had what she wanted. She was wrong. Things were about to get much, much worse. That evening, as Maria packed up to leave, Daniel walked into the kitchen, loosening his tie after a long day of meetings. He smiled at Sophia, who immediately reached her arms up to him. Daniel had grown fond of the little girl over the past year. He often slipped her small toys, called her little boss, let her sit in his office chair while he worked. "Hey there, little boss," Daniel said, lifting Sophia into his arms. "How was your day?" Sophia giggled, pointing at a small bruise-like mark on her mother's wrist that Maria had tried to hide beneath her sleeve. "Mommy, go ouch," Sophia said simply, in the innocent way toddlers say things without understanding their weight. Daniel's smile faded slightly. He looked at Maria. "Everything okay?" Maria forced a smile, pulling her sleeve down. "Just an accident, Mr. Hayes. I bumped into the cart." Daniel studied her for a moment longer than necessary. Something in his gut told him not to fully believe her, but he didn't push. He had a board meeting in 20 minutes and a fiancée waiting for him upstairs. He let it go for now. But Sophia's words had planted a seed. And seeds, even small ones, have a way of growing roots no one can predict. That night, as Maria walked home with Sophia asleep against her shoulder, she didn't know that the storm was coming. She didn't know that within weeks, her daughter's innocent honesty would tear down the walls Victoria had built so carefully. Walls made of charm, manipulation, and quiet abuse. What would you do if you were in Maria's place? Trapped between survival and silence. Victoria thought she had everything under control. She had no idea a toddler was watching her every move. Weeks passed, and the cruelty in the Hayes mansion grew bolder. Victoria had begun testing limits, pushing harder, knowing or believing that Daniel was too busy, too trusting, too in love to notice. Started small. Victoria would accidentally knock over vases for Maria to clean up on her hands and knees. She would demand Maria redo tasks that were already perfect, simply to watch her exhaustion. She would make comments about Maria's clothes, her accent, the way she spoke to Sophia in Spanish. "This is America," Victoria snapped one afternoon when she heard Maria humming a lullaby to Sophia in Spanish. "Speak English in my house." Maria's jaw tightened, but she nodded. "Yes, ma'am." The household staff, a chef named Carlos, a gardener named Pete, and an older housekeeper named Dorothy who had worked for Daniel's late mother, had all noticed the shift in Victoria's behavior. They whispered among themselves but said nothing to Daniel. Victoria had made it clear in not-so-subtle ways that anyone who caused trouble for her would find themselves unemployed. Dorothy, the oldest and most experienced of the staff, pulled Maria aside one day in the laundry room. "Honey, you need to be careful," she said softly, folding towels with practiced hands. "I've worked in rich houses for 30 years. I've seen women like her before. They smile in front of the boss and become monsters the second he leaves the room." "I know," Maria whispered,